All Creatures Great and Small, Chapter 63. Siegfried had a habit of pulling at the lobe of his ear and staring blankly ahead when preoccupied. He was doing it now, his other hand outstretched, crumbling a crust of bread on his plate. I didn't usually pry into my boss's meditations, and anyway, I wanted to be off on the morning round. But there was something portentous in his face which made me speak. "What's the matter? Something on your mind?" Siegfried turned his head slowly, and his eyes glared sightlessly for a few moments until recognition dawned. He stopped his lobe pulling, got to his feet, walked over to the window, and looked out at the empty street. "There is, James. There is indeed. In fact, I was just about to ask your advice. It's about this letter I got this morning." He ransacked his pockets impatiently, pulling out handkerchiefs, thermometers, crumpled banknotes, lists of calls, till he found a long blue envelope. "Here, read it." I opened the envelope and quickly scanned the single sheet. I looked up, puzzled. "Sorry, I don't get it. All it says here is that H.W.S.T.J. Ransom Major General would like the pleasure of your company at the Broughton races on Saturday. No problem there, is there? You like racing." But it's not so simple as that," Siegfried said, starting again on the lobe. "This is in the nature of a trial. General Ransom is one of the big boys in the Northwest racing circuit, and he's bringing one of his pals along on Saturday to vet me. They're going to examine me for soundness." I must have looked alarmed because he grinned. "Look, I better start at the beginning, and I'll cut it short. The officials of the Northwest Circuit are looking for a veterinarian surgeon to supervise all meetings. You know, the local man attends if there's a race course in his town and he's on call in case of injury to the horses. But this would be different. This supervisory vet would deal with cases of suspected doping and the like. In fact, he'd have to be a bit of a specialist. Well, I've had a whisper that they think I might be the man for the job. And that's what Saturday's about. I know old Ransom, but I haven't met his colleague. The idea is to have a day at the races with me and size me up. If you got the job, would it mean giving up general practice? I asked, and a chill wind seemed to creep around me at the idea. No. But it would mean spending something like 3 days a week on race courses. And I'm wondering if that wouldn't be just a bit much. Well, I don't know. I finished my coffee and pushed back my chair. "I'm not really the one to advise you on this. I haven't had a lot of experience with racehorses, and I'm not interested in racing. You'll have to make up your own mind. But you've often talked of specializing in horsework, and you love the atmosphere of a race course." "You're right there, James. I do. And there's no doubt the extra money would come in very useful. It's what every practice needs. A contract of some sort, a regular income from somewhere to make you less dependent on the farmers paying their bills." He turned away from the window. "Anyway, I'll go to Broughton races with them on Saturday, and we'll see how it turns out. And you must come too." "Me? Why?" "Well, it says in the letter, 'and partner.' That means some woman. They'll have their wives with them, no doubt." "Doesn't matter what it means, James. You're coming with me. A day out and a bit of free food and booze will do you good. Tristan can hold the fort for a few hours." It was nearly noon on Saturday when I answered the doorbell. As I walked along the passage, it was easy to identify the people beyond the glass door. General Ransom was short and square, with a mustache of surprising blackness, thrusting aggressively from his upper lip. Colonel Tremaine was tall, hawk-nosed, and stooping, but he shared with his companion the almost tangible aura of authority, which comes from a lifetime of command. Two Tweety women stood behind them on the lower step. I opened the door, feeling my shoulders squaring and my heels coming together under the battery of fierce, unsmiling glares. "Mr. Farnan," barked the general. "Expecting us, I think." I retreated a pace and opened the door. "Oh, yes, certainly. Please come in." The two women swept in first. Mrs. Ramsom, as squat and chunky and even tougher looking than her husband. Then Mrs. Tremaine, much younger and attractive in a hard-boiled fashion. All of them completely ignored me, except the colonel, who brought up the rear and fixed me for a moment with a fishy eye. I had been instructed to dispense sherry, and once inside the sitting room, I began to pour from a decanter. I was halfway up the second glass when Siegfried walked in. I split some of the sherry. My boss had really spruced up for the occasion. His lean frame was draped in cavalry twill of flawless cut. The long, strong-boned face was freshly shaven, the small, sandy mustache neatly clipped. He swept off a brand-new bowler as he came in, and I put down my decanter and gazed at him with proprietary pride. Maybe there had been a few dukes or the odd earl in Siegfried's family tree. But be that as it may, the two army men seemed in an instant to have become low-bred and a trifle scruffy. There was something almost ingratiating in the way the general went up to Siegfried. "Farnan, me dear fella, how are you? Good to see you again. Let me introduce you to me wife, Mrs. Tremaine, Colonel Tremaine." The colonel astonishingly dug up a twisted smile, but my main interest was in the reaction of the ladies. Mrs. Ransom, looking up at Siegfried as he bent over her, just went to pieces. It was unbelievable that this formidable fortress should crumble at the first shot, but there it was. The tough lines melted from her face, and she was left with a big, sloppy smile, looking like anybody's dear old mum. Mrs. Tremaine's response was different, but no less dramatic. As the steady gray eyes swept her, she seemed to wither, and it was as if a spasm of exquisite pain twisted her cheeks. She controlled herself with an effort, but looked after Siegfried with wishful hunger as he turned back to the men. I began to slosh the sherry violently into the glasses. Damn it. There it was again, the same old thing. And yet he didn't do anything, just looked at them. Hell, it wasn't fair. Sherry over, we moved outside and installed ourselves in Siegfried's Rover, on which an immaculate coach-building job had been done since the disaster of last summer. It was an impressive turnout. The car, after a morning's forced labor by Tristan with hose and leather, shone like a mirror. Siegfried, in the driver's seat, extended an elegant arm to his brother as we drove away. I couldn't help feeling that the only superfluous object was myself, squatting uncomfortably on a little let-down seat, facing the two army men who sat to attention in the back seat, their bowlers pointed rigidly to the front. Between them, Mrs. Tremaine stared wonderingly at the back of Siegfried's head. We lunched on the course, Siegfried comfortably at home with the smoked salmon, the cold chicken, and the champagne. There was no doubt he had scored a tremendous success during the meal, discussing racing knowledgeably with the men and dispensing charm equally to their wives. The tough Mrs. Ransom positively simpered as he marked her card for her. It was quite certain that if the new appointment hung upon his behavior today, a vote at this time would have been him home and dry. After lunch, we went down to the paddock and had a look at the horses parading for the first race. I could see Siegfried expanding as he took in the scene, the jostling crowds, the shouting bookies, the beautiful animals pacing around, the jockeys, tiny, colorful, durable, chatting to the trainers out in the middle. He had got through enough champagne at lunch to sharpen his appreciation, and he was the very picture of a man who just knew he was going to have a successful day. Merriweather, the course vet, joined us to watch the first race. Siegfried knew him slightly, and they were chatting after the race when the vet wanted sign went up. A man hurried up to Merriweather. That horse that slipped at the last bend is still down and doesn't look like getting up. The vet started for his car, which was parked in readiness near the rails. He turned towards us. You two want to come? Siegfried looked inquiringly at his party and received gracious nods of assent. We hurried after our colleague. Within seconds, we were racing down the course towards the last bend. Merriweather, hanging onto the wheel as we sped over the grass, grunted half to himself. Hell, I hope this thing hasn't got a fracture. If there's one thing I mortally hate, it's shooting horses. It didn't look good when we got to the spot. The sleek animal lay flat on its side, showing no movement apart from the labored rise and fall of its ribs. The jockey, blood streaming from a cut brow, knelt by its head. What do you think, sir? Has he broken a leg? Let's have a look. Merriweather began to palpate the extended limbs, running strong fingers over one bone, then another, carefully flexing the joints of fetlock, knee, shoulder, hock. Nothing wrong there, certainly no fracture. Then he pointed suddenly at the head. Look at his eyes. We looked. They were glazed, and there was a slight but unmistakable nystagmus. Concussion? Siegfried said. That's it. He's just had a bang on the head. Merriweather got off his knees, looking happier. Come on, we'll push him onto his chest. I think he ought to be able to get up with a bit of help. There were plenty of helpers from the crowd, and the horse was rolled easily till he rested on his sternum, forelegs extended forward. After a couple of minutes in this position, he struggled to his feet and stood swaying slightly. A stable lad walked him away. Merriweather laughed. Well, that wasn't so bad. Good horse, that. I think he'll be all right after a rest. Siegfried had started to reply when we heard a psst, psst from beyond the rails. We looked up and saw a stout, red-faced figure gesturing at us eagerly. Hey, hey, it was saying, come over here a minute. We went over. There was something about the face which Siegfried seemed to find intriguing. He looked closer at the grinning, pudgy features, the locks of oily black hair falling over the brown, and cried out in delight. God help us, Stewie Brannan! Here, James, come and meet another colleague. We came through college together. Siegfried had told me a lot about Stewie Brannan, so much, in fact, that I seemed to be shaking hands with an old, well-remembered friend. Sometimes when the mood was on us, Siegfried and I would sit up nearly till dawn over a bottle in the big room at Skeldale House, chewing over old times and recalling the colorful characters we had known. I remembered he had told me he had overtaken Stewie about halfway through the course and had qualified while Stewie was still battling in his third year. Siegfried had described him as totally unambitious, averse to study, disinclined to wash or shave. In fact, his idea of the young man least likely to succeed. But there had been something touching about him. The ingenuineness of a child, a huge, all-embracing affection for his fellow humans, an impregnable cheerfulness. Siegfried called over to Merryweather. Will you give my apologies to my friends when you go back? There's a chap here I have to see. I'll only be a few minutes. Merryweather waved, got into his car, and drove back up the course as we ducked under the rails. Siegfried seized the bulky figure by the arm. Come on, Stewie. Where can we get a drink?